If you have diabetes or prediabetes and you still start every single morning with this drink, your blood sugar may be rising far faster than you realize. And the most dangerous part is that you probably think you are making a healthy choice. That is exactly how this problem hides. The label says natural. It says heart healthy. It says plant-based, low-fat, or good for your lifestyle. But your pancreas does not read. Advertising. It does not care about the color of the packaging or the promises printed on the front of the carton. Your body only reacts to one thing: what actually enters your bloodstream. And some of the most common breakfast drinks people over 60 consume every morning are quietly creating the exact blood sugar chaos they are. B5, desperately trying to avoid. Now let me ask you something. Have you noticed that your morning glucose numbers seem harder to control than they used to be? Maybe you are eating carefully. Maybe you are avoiding desserts, soda, and candy. Maybe you are genuinely trying to do everything right. Yet somehow, after breakfast, you still feel exhausted, foggy, sleepy, dizzy. Your energy crashes before lunchtime. And your blood sugar readings still come back higher than expected. If that sounds familiar, you are not imagining it. And no, it is not simply part of aging. Very often, the real problem is not the obvious sugar people worry about. It is the hidden glucose spike coming from what they drink every single morning without a second thought. Sometimes the most damaging part of breakfast is not the toast, not the cereal, not even the dessert. Sometimes it is the liquid sitting right beside the plate. I'm Dr. Miller, and after more than 2 decades helping older adults manage diabetes, insulin resistance, and metabolic disease, I can tell you this with complete honesty. Most people fail to control their blood sugar, not because they lack discipline, but because they have been taught to focus on the wrong things. They fear obvious sugar, while completely overlooking the silent metabolic damage happening in everyday healthy foods and drinks. And today, we are going to change that. We are going to break down the morning drinks that raise blood sugar the fastest. The ones that secretly worsen insulin resistance over time, and the healthier options that support stable energy and better glucose control instead. And I want you to stay with me until the end, because the most dangerous drink on this list is not soda. And the best replacement surprises almost everyone when they hear it for the first time. Before we begin, I want you to do one thing. Go down to the comments right now and tell me what drink you usually have in the morning. Coffee with milk? Oat milk? Juice? Tea? Almond milk? Because your experience might help someone else realize they are making the exact same hidden mistake. Let us start with one of the most common breakfast drinks in America and one of the most misunderstood when it comes to diabetes: whole cow's milk. Now, I know what many people are thinking. Milk is natural. People have been drinking it forever. How could it possibly be bad for blood sugar? And that is exactly where the hidden danger begins. Because natural does not automatically mean blood sugar friendly. Your body does not judge food based on tradition. It responds based on chemistry. And lactose, the natural sugar found in milk, is still sugar. The problem is not that milk is toxic. It is not. Whole milk contains calcium, protein, and important nutrients. But for someone over 60 whose body is already struggling with insulin resistance or unstable glucose levels, that lactose load matters far more than most people realize. Once lactose enters the digestive system, it breaks down quickly into glucose and galactose, which then enter the bloodstream. And when that process happens every single morning, sometimes multiple times a day, it quietly pushes insulin levels higher over time. Think about it like this. Imagine your bloodstream as a highway already crowded with traffic. Every time you pour milk into your coffee, your cereal, or your tea, you are adding more cars onto that highway. One small amount may not seem dramatic, but repeated over weeks, months, and years, the system becomes overwhelmed. That constant metabolic traffic jam is one of the key drivers of worsening insulin resistance. I remember one patient particular, a man in his late 60s who was incredibly frustrated because his fasting glucose numbers stayed high no matter how carefully he ate. He, he avoided desserts completely. He walked every morning. He even stopped eating bread at breakfast. But every day, without fail, he drank 2 large cups of coffee loaded with whole milk. To him, milk did not count as carbohydrates. It was just coffee. But when we finally tracked the total amount of lactose he consumed daily, the picture became clear. After reducing the amount of milk and switching to a lower-carb alternative, his morning glucose readings began improving within just 2 weeks. And that is the mistake so many people make. They count cookies. They count soda. But they never count milk. So, here is what I want you to remember moving forward. Do not think of whole milk as a free food. It still affects blood sugar. If you use it, reduce the quantity. Pay attention to how often you consume it throughout the day. And most importantly, start recognizing milk for what it really is metabolically. A source of carbohydrates that your body must process every single time you drink it. Now let's talk about the milk that has exploded in popularity over the last few years and has convinced millions of people they are making a healthier choice for their diabetes. Oat milk. This is where marketing becomes incredibly dangerous. Oat milk is constantly promoted as heart-healthy, natural, plant-based, and better for the environment. The packaging looks clean and wholesome. Soft colors, pictures of oats, words that make people feel safe. And because it sounds healthier than soda or flavored creamers, many adults over 60 switch to oat milk believing they are helping their blood sugar. But metabolically, the story is very different. Here is the problem. Oats in their whole form contain fiber, and that fiber helps slow down the absorption of carbohydrates. But when oats are processed into liquid milk, much of that protective fiber is removed or broken down. What remains is essentially fast-digesting oat starch in liquid form, and liquid carbohydrates enter the bloodstream extremely quickly. That speed matters. When you drink oat milk, your body can convert those starches into glucose surprisingly fast, creating a sharp blood sugar spike that many people never expect. In fact, some commercial oat milk products can raise glucose levels almost as aggressively as sweetened beverages, not because they taste extremely sweet, but because the starches are absorbed so rapidly once the fiber barrier is gone. And this is exactly why so many diabetics become confused. I remember a woman in her early 70s who came into my office frustrated and discouraged because her fasting glucose numbers had suddenly become. She had stopped using whole milk because she thought oat milk was the healthier option. She saw it everywhere online. Friends recommended it. Even grocery stores placed it in the wellness section. So she began adding oat milk to her coffee every morning and using it in smoothies. Within weeks, her blood sugar readings became more unstable than before. She genuinely thought she was helping herself. But once we looked closely at the carbohydrate content and glycemic impact of the oat milk she was drinking, the reason became obvious. Her breakfast was creating a major glucose surge before her day had even properly started. And that is why I want people with diabetes or prediabetes to be extremely cautious with oat milk. I am not saying it is poison. I am saying it is often misunderstood. A product can be plant-based and still create serious blood sugar instability. Those are not the same thing. So the next time you see the words healthy or heart-friendly on a carton of oat milk, remember this: your pancreas does not respond to marketing. It only responds to glucose. Now let's move to another milk alternative that many people assume is harmless, but for blood sugar control, it may be one of the worst options on the shelf. Rice milk. The simplest way to think about rice milk is this: it is essentially liquid white rice. And if you already know how quickly white rice can raise blood sugar, You can probably imagine what happens when that same starch is turned into a drink. Rice milk has an extremely high glycemic index, meaning it converts into glucose very rapidly once it enters the body. But what makes it even more problematic is what it does not contain. Unlike whole foods that may have fiber, protein, or healthy fats to slow digestion, rice milk has almost none of those protective elements. There is very little protein, very little fat, almost nothing to slow the absorption process down. So the carbohydrates hit the bloodstream fast and hard. Imagine pouring dry leaves into a fire. That is what rice milk can do metabolically inside someone already struggling with insulin resistance. The glucose surge happens quickly. Insulin rises sharply, and the body is forced into another cycle of blood sugar instability that can leave people feeling tired, shaky, hungry, or foggy only a short time later. What makes rice milk especially concerning is that the people choosing it are often trying their best to be healthy. I commonly see this in older adults who cannot tolerate dairy and are also avoiding soy because of allergies or fears they heard online. They walk into the grocery store feeling like they have very few options left, and rice milk appears to be the safe choice. It sounds light, gentle, simple. But for someone with diabetes or prediabetes, it can quietly become one of the most disruptive parts of their breakfast routine. And because it does not taste overwhelmingly sweet, people underestimate its impact. That is the danger. Blood sugar spikes are not always obvious from taste alone. So if rice milk is currently sitting in your refrigerator, I want you to pay close attention here. There are far better alternatives available today that create dramatically less stress on your metabolism. Unsweetened almond milk is one excellent option because it is extremely low in carbohydrates and has minimal impact on blood sugar. Unsweetened coconut milk is another strong alternative, especially for people who want a creamier texture without the glucose spike. The key word is unsweetened, because when it comes to managing diabetes, the goal is not simply choosing something that sounds healthy. The goal is choosing something that keeps your bloodstream stable, your insulin response calm, and your energy steady throughout the day. Now we need to talk about what may be the most deceptive category of all, because the most dangerous word on the label is often just one simple word: sweetened. That single word changes everything. A plant-based milk can go from relatively blood sugar friendly to a metabolic disaster the moment added sugar enters the formula. And unfortunately, many older adults never realize it because the packaging still looks healthy. It still says almond milk. It still says oat milk. It still says plant-based. But hidden behind those comforting words is something your bloodstream reacts to immediately: liquid sugar. And liquid sugar is incredibly fast. Here is why this matters so much. When sugar is combined with rapidly absorbed liquid carbohydrates, the glucose spike becomes extremely aggressive. Unlike solid foods that require more digestion, sweetened drinks move through the system quickly. They enter the bloodstream almost immediately, forcing insulin to respond fast and hard. For someone already struggling with insulin resistance, that repeated daily surge becomes exhausting for the body. And the worst part is that many of these products do not even taste overwhelmingly sweet. Vanilla almond milk, chocolate oat milk, sweetened coconut milk, plant-based coffee creamers. These products are marketed as wellness choices, but many contain enormous amounts of added sugar hiding in plain sight. Some have 10, 12, even 15 grams of added sugar per serving. And most people are not using just one serving. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen someone proudly tell me they switched away from soda years ago. Yet every single morning they pour sweetened vanilla oat milk into coffee 2 or 3 times a day without realizing they are still flooding their bloodstream with sugar. And here is the pattern I see constantly. People read the label carefully the first time they buy the product. Maybe. But after that, the habit becomes automatic. They trust the brand. They recognize the packaging. And from that point on, the carton goes straight into the shopping cart week after week without another glance at the nutrition facts. That is exactly how hidden sugar becomes a daily routine. So from now on, I want you to slow down and check 3 things every single time you buy a milk alternative. First, look for the words added sugar. If the number is high, put it back. Second, check total carbohydrates, because even unsweetened products can vary dramatically. Third, pay attention to serving size. Some companies make the numbers appear smaller by using unrealistically tiny servings. Those 3 habits alone can completely change your morning glucose response. And now, we are about to shift from the dangerous choices to the ones that actually support stable blood sugar, steady energy, and a calmer metabolic system. Because not all milk alternatives work against you. Some can genuinely help. Now let's move into the options that can actually support better blood sugar control instead of quietly working against it. And one of the best places to start is unsweetened almond milk. For many people over 60 managing diabetes or prediabetes, this is one of the simplest and most effective swaps they can make almost immediately. Why? Because unsweetened almond milk is extremely low in carbohydrates. Most brands contain only 1 or 2 grams of carbs per cup, which is dramatically lower than whole milk, oat milk, or rice milk. That means it does not create the massive glucose flood we talked about earlier. Instead of overwhelming the bloodstream with rapidly absorbed sugar and starch, it enters the system quietly and gently. And your pancreas notices that difference. Remember, every time glucose rises sharply, insulin has to rush in like an emergency response team trying to control traffic on a crowded highway. The sharper the spike, the harder insulin must work. But with unsweetened almond milk, the glucose response is typically very small, meaning the insulin response stays much calmer too. For someone already dealing with insulin resistance, reducing that daily metabolic stress matters enormously over time. This is why many people notice improvements surprisingly quickly after making the switch. I remember one woman in her mid-60s who had struggled for years with high morning glucose readings despite being careful about almost everything she ate. She thought her breakfast was healthy: eggs, whole grain toast, coffee. But every morning she added large amounts of flavored dairy creamer and sweetened milk without thinking much about it. Once she switched to unsweetened almond milk and removed the hidden sugars, something interesting happened. Within about 10 days, her fasting glucose numbers became noticeably more stable. Not perfect overnight, but clearly better. And perhaps even more importantly, she stopped experiencing that heavy mid-morning crash that had been draining her energy for years. Now, there is one important thing I want you to understand about almond milk. While it is excellent for blood sugar control, it is relatively low in protein. That matters because protein helps slow digestion and keeps you feeling full longer. So if unsweetened almond milk becomes your regular choice, make sure the rest of your breakfast contains adequate protein from other sources like eggs, Greek yogurt, nuts, seeds, or lean protein options. But overall, when it comes to minimizing glucose spikes, reducing insulin stress, and creating a more stable metabolic environment in the morning, unsweetened almond milk is one of the safest and most practical options available today. And the best part? For many people, the benefits start showing up faster than they ever expected. Another excellent option that deserves far more attention in the diabetes conversation is unsweetened coconut milk. And for many people, this becomes the alternative they enjoy the most because of one simple reason: the texture. Compared to almond milk, unsweetened coconut milk is often creamier, smoother, and more satisfying in coffee, tea, or smoothies. That richer texture makes the transition away from high-sugar milk products feel much easier for people who miss the fullness of traditional dairy. And when a healthy habit actually feels enjoyable, people are far more likely to stick with it long-term. But the benefits are not just about taste. Unsweetened coconut milk is also naturally low in carbohydrates, which means it has a very small impact on blood sugar levels. Instead of sending glucose rushing into the bloodstream like oat milk or rice milk can, Coconut milk tends to create a much gentler metabolic response. That stability matters because the fewer dramatic glucose spikes you experience throughout the day, the less strain you place on your insulin system over time. Now, one of the most interesting things about coconut milk is the type of fat it contains. Coconut milk is rich in something called MCTs, or medium-chain triglycerides. These fats are processed differently by the body compared to many other fats. Instead of being stored as easily, they are rapidly used for energy, and some research suggests they may help support metabolic health and improve feelings of satiety. I want to be careful here because coconut milk is not a miracle cure for diabetes. No single food is. But when you compare it to high-carb milk alternatives that constantly spike glucose, unsweetened coconut milk creates a much calmer environment inside the body. And for people trying to stabilize blood sugar, that calmer metabolic response can make a real difference over time. There is one important clarification, though, because many people confuse two completely different products. I am not talking about the thick canned coconut milk used for cooking curries or desserts. That version is much heavier, far higher in calories, and designed for cooking rather than everyday drinking. The product I am referring to is the refrigerated, unsweetened coconut milk beverage found in the dairy alternative section of most grocery stores. And once again, the key word is unsweetened. Because even coconut milk becomes a problem when manufacturers start adding sugar, vanilla syrups, or sweet flavoring. But in its unsweetened form, it can be a smooth, satisfying, low-carb option that supports better blood sugar balance without sacrificing flavor or comfort in your daily routine. And now we arrive at the option that surprises almost everyone when I mention it. After all the confusion, all the marketing, and all the online controversy, the milk alternative that consistently performs best for blood sugar management is often unsweetened soy milk. Yes, soy milk. Most people do not expect that answer, because soy has become one of the most debated foods on the internet. But your pancreas does not care about social media controversy. It cares about glucose stability. And when we look at the actual metabolic evidence, instead of online myths, unsweetened soy milk stands out very clearly. Here is why. First, soy milk is naturally high in protein. Most unsweetened soy milk products contain around 7 to 8 grams of protein per serving, which is dramatically higher than almond milk or coconut milk. That protein matters more than many people realize because protein slows down the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. Think of it like placing speed bumps on a highway. Instead of carbohydrates flooding into the bloodstream, all at once, protein helps slow the entire process down. That creates a smoother, steadier glucose response, instead of the sharp spike and crash cycle that leaves people tired, shaky, hungry, and craving sugar only a few hours later. And that satiety effect is powerful. One of the biggest hidden problems in diabetes management is not just high blood sugar itself, but the cycle that follows unstable meals. Blood sugar spikes rapidly, insulin surges, glucose crashes, hunger returns, and the body starts chasing energy all over again. Unsweetened soy milk helps interrupt that pattern because the combination of low glycemic impact and high protein creates much more stable energy throughout the morning. Now, let me address the concern many people immediately have. But what about soy? This is where separating myths from evidence becomes extremely important. Over the years, soy has been surrounded by exaggerated claims online, especially regarding hormones and long-term health. But large-scale scientific studies examining moderate soy consumptions in adults have consistently found that soy foods are safe for most people and may even support cardiovascular health, which is particularly important for adults with diabetes. Of course, people with soy allergies should avoid it, and anyone with specific medical conditions should speak with their doctor. But for the majority of adults, the evidence supporting unsweetened soy milk as a blood sugar-friendly option is remarkably strong. And when you compare everything together, glucose stability, satiety, protein content, and insulin response, unsweetened soy milk consistently rises to the top, not because it is trendy, not because it is heavily marketed, but because biologically, It simply works better for blood sugar control than most alternatives people are drinking every morning without realizing the difference. Now, let's make this practical because information only becomes powerful when you actually apply it. And the good news is that this does not require a complicated diet overhaul or a perfect lifestyle transformation overnight. In fact, one of the most effective changes you can make starts with something incredibly simple: your next trip to the kitchen. Step 1 is this: go look at the milk product you are currently using right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Pick up the carton and turn it around, because the truth about blood sugar is almost never on the front label. It is on the nutrition facts panel hiding on the back. And that brings us to step 2. There are only two numbers I want you to focus on at first: total carbohydrates and added sugars. That is it. Do not get overwhelmed trying to understand every ingredient or every marketing claim. Just look at those two numbers carefully. Many people are shocked the first time they realize how much hidden sugar or starch is sitting inside something they believed was healthy. Some products that look natural or plant-based can contain enough carbohydrates and added sugars to spike glucose almost as aggressively as dessert. And because these drinks are consumed every single morning, the impact compounds day after day after day. Now here is step 3, and this is where the real experiment begins. For the next 14 days, replace your current milk with either unsweetened soy milk or unsweetened almond milk. If soy works well for you, excellent. If not, unsweetened almond milk is another very strong option. The important thing is consistency. Do not change 10 things at once. Keep the experiment simple so your body can clearly show you the difference. Use the new milk in your coffee, tea, cereal, smoothies, or wherever you normally use milk. And then comes step 4. Pay attention. Watch your fasting glucose in the morning. Notice whether the numbers become more stable. Notice how you feel after breakfast. Are you still crashing by mid-morning? Are the cravings weaker? Is your energy steadier throughout the day? Because something fascinating happens when people finally reduce those hidden liquid carbohydrates. The body often responds faster than expected. Many people notice changes within days, not months, and that early feedback matters. It creates confidence. It proves that small daily habits can create measurable results. This is not about perfection. It is not about fear. It is about understanding how your body responds and giving it a calmer, more stable environment to work with every single morning. Sometimes better blood sugar control does not begin with medication changes. Sometimes it begins with what you pour into your coffee. Now, before we finish, I want to zoom out for a moment because milk choices are important, but they are only one piece of a much bigger picture. Blood sugar control is not shaped by a single meal. It is shaped by patterns. And some of the most powerful patterns begin in the very first hour of your morning. What you eat and drink at breakfast often determines the metabolic direction of your entire day. A stable breakfast tends to create stable energy, steadier cravings, and better glucose control through the afternoon. But a breakfast that spikes blood sugar early in the morning can trigger a chain reaction that lasts for hours. Glucose rises sharply. Insulin surges. Energy crashes. Cravings appear. Then the body starts searching for quick fuel again. And before people realize it, the entire day becomes a cycle of spikes and crashes that feels impossible to control. That is why morning habits matter so much. But food is not the only thing affecting your glucose levels. Stress plays a major role too, especially for adults over 60. Many people do not realize that the body releases a hormone called cortisol during stress. And cortisol directly raises blood sugar levels, even if you have not eaten anything at all. Think about that for a moment. You can eat a healthy breakfast, avoid sugar completely, and still see higher glucose readings during periods of chronic stress, poor sleep, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion. That is because your body interprets stress as a survival threat. And one of the ways it responds is by releasing extra glucose into the bloodstream for emergency energy. This is why managing diabetes is never just about food alone. It is about creating a calmer internal environment overall. And this brings me to something I tell my patients all the time. Good defaults beat willpower. Most people think successful health habits come from extreme discipline, but in reality, lasting health changes usually come from making good decisions automatic. If the healthier milk is already sitting in your refrigerator, you will naturally use it tomorrow morning without needing motivation or self-control. The environment makes the decision for you. That is powerful, because willpower fades when people are tired, stressed, busy, or emotional. But habits continue quietly in the background, and over time, those small automatic habits shape your metabolism far more than occasional perfect decisions ever could. So do not underestimate the power of simple morning routines. Sometimes the smallest changes repeated consistently are the ones that protect your energy, your glucose stability, and your long-term health the most. So, let's bring everything together clearly before we finish, because the most important thing is not just understanding the problem. It is knowing exactly what to do next. Today, we talked about the milk choices that quietly raise blood sugar, and the ones that support better glucose control instead. And by now, one thing should be very clear. Not all healthy drinks affect your body the same way. Some of the worst options for blood sugar stability are the ones most heavily marketed as wellness products. Oat milk, especially sweetened versions, can create surprisingly aggressive glucose spikes because the starches are absorbed so quickly in liquid form. Rice milk acts almost like liquid white rice, flooding the bloodstream with rapidly absorbed carbohydrates while offering almost no protein or fat to slow digestion down. And sweetened plant-based milks of any kind, vanilla almond milk, chocolate oat milk, flavored creamers, become dangerous the moment added sugar enters the equation. But we also talked about the better choices. Unsweetened almond milk is one of the safest low-carbohydrate options available and creates very little glucose disruption for most people. And unsweetened soy milk consistently stands out as the strongest overall choice because it combines low glycemic impact with meaningful protein, better satiety, and a much steadier insulin response. And here is what I really want you to remember after this video ends. You are not failing. Your body is not broken. And your diabetes is not proof that you lack discipline or self-control. Most people were simply never taught how these everyday foods and drinks actually affect the body metabolically. Nobody explained why liquid carbohydrates matter so much. Nobody explained why a product labeled plant-based could still send glucose soaring. Nobody explained why one small daily habit repeated over years could quietly shape insulin resistance over time. Now you know. And knowledge changes everything. Because once you understand what your body is responding to, you stop guessing, you stop blaming yourself, and you begin making smarter decisions instead of simply trying harder. Remember this: small repeated habits create enormous long-term outcomes. The milk you pour into your coffee every morning may seem insignificant in the moment, but repeated 365 days a year, that one habit becomes powerful. Better choices repeated consistently can slowly stabilize energy, improve fasting glucose, reduce cravings, and support your long-term health in ways many people never expect. So before you leave, I want you to do two things. First, go down to the comments and tell me which milk you currently use most often. Whole milk, oat milk, almond milk, soy milk. Your experience may help someone else realize they are making the same hidden mistake. And second, if this video helped you understand your blood sugar in a new way, subscribe to the channel and join us for more practical, evidence-based health guidance designed specifically for adults over 60 trying to protect their energy, independence, and long-term health. I'll see you in the next video.